History is often written by the victors, by men in stone palaces behind high walls, describing the barbarians beyond their gates. For centuries, the empires of China, Persia, and Rome looked toward the Eurasian steppe with one emotion: terror. To them, the steppe was a void, an ocean of grass where civilization ended and danger began. They saw only lawless nomads, but they missed the truth. The steppe was not a void, it was a forge. And in the 3rd century BC, in the freezing winds of what is now Mongolia, that forge produced a force that would reshape the balance of power again and again. They were the Xiongnu, the ancestors of the Huns. Before Attila ever haunted Rome's horizon, the Xiongnu built the blueprint for steppe empire. They unified scattered tribes into a single fist. They forced China's emperors to negotiate on steppe terms. And their rise is the story of one man, cast out, hunted, and forged into something colder than steel. This is the story of the rise of the nomads. This is the story of Modu Chanyu. To understand the Huns, we must first understand the logic of the steppe. For a nomad, survival is strategy, and strategy is speed. While the Han dynasty relied on mass infantry, heavy shields, and disciplined formations, the Xiongnu mastered mobility. A Xiongnu warrior lived in the saddle. He learned to ride before he could walk. And steppe life demanded an intimacy with the horse that settled empires couldn't imitate. But speed alone doesn't build an empire. The steppe needed a weapon, and it had one. The composite bow, layers of wood, horn, and sinew, was small enough to use on horseback, but powerful enough to dominate at range. It could outshoot many conventional bows and strike hard through leather armor. Compact, efficient, brutal in the hands of a rider who never stopped moving. Yet in 215 BC, even that was not enough. The Qin dynasty had unified China and turned north with a massive war machine. General Meng Tian pushed deep with an army said to be hundreds of thousands strong, driving the Xiongnu from the fertile grazing lands of the Ordos. Pressured from every side, China to the south, Donghu to the east, Yezhi to the west, the Xiongnu faced a question the steppe hates most: adapt or disappear. They were led by a Chanyu named Tuman. Tuman was a survivor, but he was about to make a mistake that would cost him everything. He had an eldest son, Modu, talented, charismatic, and dangerous. And Tuman had taken a new, younger wife. She wanted her own son to inherit. The poison worked. Tuman decided Modu had to die. But on the steppe, a ruler cannot openly murder his firstborn without risking revolt. Tuman needed a cleaner death, a death delivered by someone else. Tuman sent Modu as a hostage to the Yezhi, presented as diplomacy, as peace. Then, the moment Modu was in their hands, Tuman launched a surprise attack. The message was clear: betrayal. The plan was cold. The Yezhi would execute the hostage. Tuman would be rid of his son and free to name a new heir. But Tuman misjudged the fire in Modu. When the Yezhi came for him, Modu didn't beg, he moved. He fought his way to the stables, seized a fast horse, and vanished into the night. A lone rider crossing a hostile world. Ice wind, open plains, and enemies behind him. He returned alive, and the steppe understood what that meant. The tribes didn't see a refugee. They saw a man who had outrun death and humiliated his enemies. Tuman could not kill him now without consequences. Instead, He gave Modu command of a cavalry unit, 10,000 riders. Tumon thought it was a leash. Modu knew it was a key. Because on the steppe, loyalty is never permanent. It must be built, tested, hardened. If Modu was going to survive his father's next move, he needed men who would follow him past fear, past custom, past hesitation. He needed obedience that didn't break. Modu invented a tool to turn men into an extension of his will, the whistling arrow. A signal arrow with a hollow tip screaming as it cut the air. And with it, he gave his cavalry one rule: shoot where the whistling arrow strikes. Whoever does not shoot dies. The first test was simple. On a hunt, Modu fired at a wild boar. 10,000 arrows followed. The animal fell instantly. Success. Then the tests turned darker. During a public display, Modu fired the whistling arrow at his own favorite horse. Some men hesitated because in their world, a horse was more than property. It was survival. Modu said nothing. He simply had the hesitating men seized and executed. Next, the whistling arrow struck closer to the heart of taboo. Some accounts say Modu aimed at someone within his own household, testing whether fear of him had fully replaced every other loyalty. And the arrows followed. Modu watched, not with rage, with confirmation. Finally, in 209 BC, during a great hunt, Modu rode behind Tumon. He knocked the whistling arrow and fired. Tumon went down before he could turn. And Modu didn't stop there. He removed rivals, silenced opposition, and broke the old order in a single, terrifying sweep. The coup was complete. Modu was Chanyu. The Xiongnu were no longer a loose confederation. They were a wolf pack, moving as one. Modu's rise echoed across the steppe. To the east, the Donghu, the dominant power in the region, decided to test this upstart. They believed he could be bullied. They demanded Modu's best horses. The council erupted. Modu raised a hand. Why fight a neighbor over a horse? He gave them the horses. The Donghu grew bolder. They demanded Modu's wives. Again the council demanded war. Modu answered, "Why fight a neighbor over a woman?" He complied. The Donghu king mistook restraint for weakness. Then came the final demand. A strip of saline wasteland between their borders, useless for grazing, salt and dust. The Xiongnu elders smiled. "It's worthless," they said. "Give it away." Modu's expression changed. "Horses and women are personal property," he said. "But land is the foundation of the state." He executed the elders who advised surrender. Then he ordered every man who could draw a bow to mount up. The Xiongnu hit the Donghu like a collapsing sky, fast, coordinated, and merciless. The Donghu were not simply defeated, their power was shattered. Modu turned west and broke the Yuji, driving them from key corridors of movement and trade. And the steppe began to shift, tribes moving, borders breathing, pressure traveling outward like a shock wave. By 200 BC, Modu had united all who draw the bow. Now he turned south, toward the crown jewel, China. In China, the Han dynasty had risen. Emperor Gaozu, battle-hardened, confident, looked north with contempt. He gathered an enormous army, records describe it as hundreds of thousands strong, and marched to end the steppe threat in one blow. Modu welcomed it, because he knew he could not smash Chinese heavy infantry head-on, not on their terms. So he chose the battlefield the steppe always chooses: distance, weather, patience, deception. He used the feigned retreat, the oldest trap in nomad warfare. He sent weaker troops and starving cattle forward, creating the illusion of a collapsing enemy. And Gaozu took the bait. Eager for a decisive victory, he pushed ahead with his elite force, leaving slower elements behind. He chased the fleeing nomads deep into the cold, all the way to Baideng, a flat-topped mountain, a plateau. And then the steppe closed its jaws. From the surrounding heights, Xiongnu cavalry emerged, wave after wave, appearing where there should have been nothing. Some accounts describe formations arranged by horse color: white to the west, gray to the east, black to the north, red to the south. Whether literal or symbolic, the message was unmistakable. The Emperor of China was surrounded. For 7 days, the dragon was trapped by the wolf: cold, hunger, frostbite, night pressure, whistling arrows in the darkness, reminding every soldier that the steppe never sleeps. But Modu was not interested in a glorious slaughter. He understood something emperors often forget. If you kill the emperor, you create a nation's revenge. Modu didn't want a martyr. He wanted a precedent. So he opened a gap, a narrow exit, a golden bridge, and allowed Gaozu to withdraw in humiliation. The result was Heqin, a treaty that forced the Han court to treat the Chanyu as an equal, sending a royal princess and annual tribute: silk, wine, grain. For decades, the Xiongnu dictated terms along the northern frontier. They controlled routes and leverage that would shape what later became the Silk Road. The steppe had done the impossible. It had made an empire negotiate. Modu Chanyu died in 174 BC. He left behind more than victories. He left a structure, a model, divided authority, left and right kings, hierarchy, discipline, and a political machine built for movement. Centuries later, other steppe powers would echo the same logic: Turks, Mongols, and more. But no empire is immortal. Over time, internal fractures and renewed Han pressure splintered the Xiongnu. The southern Xiongnu submitted to China, but the northern Xiongnu refused. Defeated and displaced, they began a long push westward. They faded from Chinese records into the vast interior of Central Asia. For a time, the world forgot them. Then, in the 4th century AD, a new terror rose near the Volga. They had changed, intermarried, evolved, but they still carried the composite bow. They still rode like something the settled world could not understand. They were no longer the Xiongnu. They were the Huns, and they were waiting for a new wolf to lead them, one who would bring the steppe's lessons into the heart of Europe. The stage was set for the collision of East and West. In the next episode, we follow the Huns into the Roman world and witness the rise of the man history would fear most. Attila is coming.